Hi guys, Simon Trusellian here for the Lockdown Chronicles 22, and today I just wanted to talk a little bit about making sense out of the pandemic, because we're talking now, and what you're going to be seeing over the next couple of weeks is that there's going to be this pivot away from the talk of the coronavirus. We're going to start to see that plateau. Still a lot of fear out there, but we're going to be talking more about the economy now. And everyone is going to be talking about that. We're already looking at different models of how people will possibly be making money in the future, how businesses are going to react, trying to create a safe space for their employees and their clients, whilst at the same time, reinflating the economy. When you have people staying at home, they're obviously not spending. They're trying to save. They're trying to restore all of their reserves, and that means that an economy that is not flowing is going to be an economy that dies. It just stagnates. If people are actually not spending the money, then people are not being employed. Services are not being created. Products are not being bought from a wholesale point of view. They're not being retailed and they're not being bought. So that's part of the real problem. See, the thing is, unfortunately, within the actual system itself, and this is why we're going to probably see a big collapse of that system, is that the system itself has been set up as false. There's this fiat currency system. It used to be when you had the gold standard, or in America when you had the silver standard, that you only printed enough money that you could back up by gold or silver. And this went all the way back to the Knights Templar days. So that if a pilgrim was in Christendom or was going down to the Holy Land, he would take his little bag of gold into the Knights Templar commandery and put his gold down, and they would count it out and write him a promissory note. Because no one could read during that time. So they would write the note and said, I promise to pay the bearer on demand the sum of how much gold was there, and then give him the note taking the money. And then he would go down to the Crusades. Obviously, if he was carrying a bag of gold, someone's going to take it off him. But he could secrete this note somewhere upon his person. And when he got down to Acre or Jerusalem, he would go into the commandery there and he would give them the note. They would read it and say, I promise to pay the bearer on demand the sum of. And then they would give him the bag of gold and take a handful out as their interest in the transaction. And that's how basically the banking system happened. Now, of course, a lot of these pilgrims never made it, and therefore the gold just got kept. And that's exactly what the banks are doing as well. So they've already sucked up all the real money, or the real gold, or the real worth, and then created these promissory notes, which are basically just an indication of somebody else's debt to you. So that's what fiat currency is. And that all came about through what is called the Fractional Reserve Act, where the banks now only have to have 3%, I think it is, of assets that they actually say they have. So if it was a run on the bank, you would get 3% of what you actually had in the bank, or 3% of the people would get all their money, and that's about it. So the Federal Reserve, when the Federal Reserve Act was created, the Federal Reserve Bank, it's not federal, it has no reserves, and it's not a bank. So there's a big misnomer on that one. Basically what the Federal Reserve does, and this is what when people talk about the national debt, it's like, well, who are we in debt to? The world debt. Who's the world in debt to? Arcturus or Alpha Centauri. This is false debt that has been created because the Federal Reserve Act allows the Federal Reserve to print money and then charge the country interest on the money that it's printed. So therefore, in order to be able to pay back that loan, pay back that interest, you have to print more money. So you're never going to get out of debt. It's just as simple as that. And it's basically just been a scam for about the last 100 or so years. So at some point there's going to be a collapse, and this is why the Federal Reserve suddenly came up with all these trillions of dollars, to try and reflate the economy, because if they don't, then the cat's out of the bag, the emperor's got new clothes, the curtains are withdrawn, and everyone sees what we've been knowing forever, that the whole country's been bankrupt for the last 30 years. So that is the big problem that they actually have. They can actually charge you interest on money that has never existed. In the same way as when you buy a house, you go and buy Mrs. Miggins's house, you don't go around with a big wheelbarrow full of cash and then dump it on a lawn and take the cash. Someone just writes it off as a ledger entry. more money has actually been made in the world since we've just started speaking than you and I could actually spend in a lifetime. So what's it made out of? It's made out of nothing. And therefore, when the economy reinflates, all this nonsense that's going on about, oh, we're going to go into a depression, it's going to be unlike anything else, it will reinflate because of human effort. As soon as a human puts some effort into something, that something gets more valuable. We are the asset. And therefore, it will inflate, as it has done in time immemorial. I mean, it will just happen that way. Now, I've been looking at some of the things that people are positioning, and some of them actually it could actually be quite good. This universal income, for instance, there's a pros and cons to what they're talking about, universal income. And believe me, this stimulus check that they put out is a precursor to that. Okay, they're getting you ready to accept some form of free money. I mean, who wouldn't want free money, huh? So it allows you then to feel a little bit good about the government, but unfortunately it puts you in an emotional bind, because if you continue to get free money, it's almost like the old thing of give a man a fish a day and that'll be that. But if you teach him to fish, he can feed himself forever. So this is what they're actually going to be doing for a lot of the populace, is actually giving away this money in order to be able to create a low-class system of people that are dependent on the government, and they will continue to vote for that because if they don't, they're going to cut their own wrists. So in some ways, this universal income is good for a government because it actually then they can budget. They know how much money is going to be free flowing into the system, because 95% of people are going to spend that money. If they're getting whatever, $500 a week or $1,000 a week, they will spend that money. And that money then goes back into the economy. The cool thing is that with that is that the government get taxes on everything that's spent. Taxes on fuel, taxes on clothing, all sorts of things. So you can expect that there will be some form of value-added tax that would come in if they did that, so that they would be making 10% on all of that money that's going out there. So it actually makes sense to them. And also, if you cancelled welfare as well and took all of that away and just replaced it with a universal income, you would have several things happen. The people that don't want to work or can't work or just are too lazy to work, they would still be there, but they would still be spending money into the system, like they are at the moment with unemployment. But you could be then taxing that as well and getting that money back. What it would do is create a safety net for a lot of the more vulnerable parts of society, and that would actually help with things like domestic violence and suicide and perhaps drug addiction, even though a lot of the money would be spent on drugs, of course. But in that way, you could at least see that the money would flow around. Every month, there would be more injections of money going in, more money being spent, more taxes being paid from in income tax, state tax, fuel tax, whatever, So in that way, it makes a lot of sense. The bad news is that then you get people that are dependent on that. As I said, that will actually increase their level of dependency, and I think that's always a very sad thing because it just puts people in basically slavery. It's just paid slavery. So in that way, there are some good things and some bad things about a universal income, and also it discourages innovation. It discourages entrepreneurship. So if they took away the basic income as soon as you made that, then again, unless you're actually making good money, there is this disincentive to actually work hard for that. Also, on this universal Medicare for all, I know that people are talking about this massive amount of spending, but that's only a massive amount of spending when you consider what it costs at the moment. And what it costs at the moment, those are so inflated. I mean, the medicines you could buy in India, for instance, exactly the same medicine as to what you could buy in the United States, is just so poles apart. So I do feel that they've got a lot of their numbers wrong within that. I mean, the National Health Service in the UK is probably one of the crown jewels in any economic system, because at least it allows for a guaranteed right, if you like, for any citizen of that country, and indeed any person that is actually even visiting that country, to get some form of care. They're not going to die. The first question in America is, well, who's your insurer? And then that is then based upon what type of care you're likely to get. I mean, they won't deny you, but you're going to be left with a massively heavy bill that you're going to be unable to pay, and that's why a lot of bankruptcies are all about medical insurance. So if there was some degree of system, like they have in Australia, the Medicare system over there, it covers 60% of everything that you have done, but you're still liable for that 40%. So it discourages, sort of like the people just go in there for medical things that don't really need. But at the same time, it gives some degree of responsibility to the person as well. I like the Japanese model. The Japanese model is that every family has a family doctor, and that family doctor gets paid every month by the family, and until someone in the family gets sick. Okay, so as soon as someone in the family gets sick, they don't get paid. So there's a big incentive for preventative care, to allow the doctors to actually look at the family and their lifestyles, if there are any pre-existing conditions, all this type of thing, to give really good advice as to preventative care for health. And it should be a health service, not a sickness service. Because what we have, unfortunately, you only go to the doctor when you're sick, and he actually just prescribes a whole bunch of drugs that, he may get a kickback off, but also there's massive fraud and corruption within the big pharmaceuticals, who own a lot of the university medical system, and basically all they are is just drug runners. If we had more of an emphasis on healthy eating, healthy habits, and there was a lot more education in regards to that, and a lot more incentives to that, like the safe driver thing, if you don't have accidents, then your insurance goes down because you're proving that you're a responsible adult. Well, how about doing that on the health side? So if you actually have a fitness test, say every year, heart rate is looked at, what we used to do in the military, it used to be called the pull-ins. They'll test your eyes, they'll test your pulse, they'll test your respiratory system, they'll test everything. It's like a checkup on a car, and you'll just be given this tick of health, and away you go. If we had some system like that, where the healthy were not being penalized because they're making good decisions in regards to their health, and they would be getting money off of their health insurance, or they'll be considered a lesser risk and a lesser burden on the health service, is great. Now, obviously, some people just are sick people, and that's just unfortunate, but they still need to have some degree of care if we're going to be a compassionate society. So I do feel that, we need to look at the possibility of a universal Medicare system, but not necessarily to try and just buy it from the capitalist, very expensive system that exists now. It would be a total change. Excuse me. A lot of the insurance companies and stuff like that would have to disappear, or they would have to restructure to actually take into account all of these things. So those are some of a couple of the ideas that I had, given what the narrative is at the present time. But I think it's certainly worth looking at. We're going to start to see some big changes in economic and financial models. They talk about returning to normal. There is no returning to normal, I assure you on that. And there's a lot of groups, both on the good side and the bad side, that really don't want to return to normal. The normal wasn't actually good for us. It's not a healthy society that we've come from. We could be going into a totally tyrannical, rights-free society. That would be devastating for a lot of people. Or we could be going into a massive reawakening and a different look at how we want to craft society in the future. What we're looking at now within the next 6 months to a year, we're looking at literally a battle for the soul of the world, not just America. This is every country. This is a totally global thing that has happened, and it's happened for a reason. And the two major factions, both on the dark side and the light side, have a vested interest in winning, because whoever wins, the world is going to be changed forever, and you're in that world. We're here now. We've all got a ringside seat. You know, and I think it's actually really interesting when you think about it, that there are more people living in the world today than have lived in all of the other centuries put together. So we're all back. You know, if you believe in the reincarnation, we're back for a ringside seat. The decisions that we make over that next year will shape the world for generations to come. Have no doubt about that whatsoever. So you have a big responsibility. You got some real wake-up calls to do. Don't think this is going to go back to how it was and you can just go back to sleep. That is not going to happen, you know, and you're going to have to either fight for what you want or you sit down and accept what you're given. That's it. There are only two ways. Okay, guys, that's for me today.